I wanted to talk a little bit about love this morning. Love is a really important function of the Absolute. I've said before that love is the viscosity that we move through, that all of reality is functioning within. And it can certainly feel that way sometime. But love is really important in that it helps us tenderize, it helps us begin to approach some of the deeply held, long-held beliefs, convictions, judgments, all of that. Because we begin developing those as children, and when we decide that something is reality or fact, then we hold it in a category that doesn't get challenged. We don't question it. And every human does this. So we get to where we have this collection of beliefs, and those become limitations, and they also become part of our identity. And really, love is the only thing that helps to tenderize us to maybe those softening. About the last year in my own practice, I've been holding the statement that every response is a choice. So no matter what happens in my life, however I respond, I'm making a choice. There's no defaults. And it's been a really interesting process seeing habituated responses. Some are based on the culture you're in or the age group you're in or all these different variables. And if you realize all of it's a choice, it really opens it up. And then last month I shifted, and I'm now holding every judgment as a choice. So any judgments that are put away as, defining reality aren't questioned. And so what I'm trying to do is just have all of these come into play, come into fluidity of, well, is it really true? Revisiting to see. And so talking about love, there's a great koan in the koan collection. I think it's in the Muman, the Gateless Gate. But it's called Nansen's Cat. Very famous koan. And Nansen was a Chinese Chan teacher. And the progression of Buddhism was that, of course, it started in India, Nepal, and one of the big practices the Buddha favored was the jhana practice, anapanasati as we know it. And as that practice geographically morphed into China, jhana was pronounced chana, and then that was shortened to chan. So they started with the jhana practice. But in my view, because of the obvious goals and the inherent striving of jhana practice, they began softening some of the benefits. And that ended up getting to where even the teachers weren't aware of all the steps and requirements and the benefits. So it morphed into what is now the silent illumination or shikantaza meditation. Still an important meditation, but it's not anapanasati, it's different than that. So anyway, Nansen was really well-regarded Chan teacher from about the 700s, somewhere in there. And one of his students became a great teacher named Joshu. In fact, the first koan most people work in koan studies called mu. And mu means something like nothing or not, absence, without, something like that. And I'll just mention the mu koan, and that's Joshu was walking with a few young monastics. In my view, one of them was feeling a bit insecure about whether they actually had Buddha nature, whether they had the capacity to be fully realized. And rather than ask that question, the student saw a passing stray dog and said, "Does this dog have Buddha nature?" And an important foundation of the Zen tradition is all beings, all sentient beings have Buddha nature. So even dogs and cats have the capacity to be fully realized as dogs or cats. And so the answer Joshu should have said was yes, the dog has Buddha nature. And instead he said wu, which in Chinese means not, or absence, without, no. And so he said, in effect, the opposite of what the student was expecting. And of course, that put the student into a tailspin. But that mu has been a koan since. Why would Joshu answer mu rather than say yes? What's in that mu? So Joshu himself was a tremendous teacher. There's a lot of his teaching that's still very relevant. But anyway, the story, the Nansen's cat, Nansen had a center, and they had built it where they had two residential wings, an east wing and a west wing. And the monastics were divided somehow between these wings. And as would happen, they had a temple cat, which in Asia there are temple cats running around that keep the rodent population down and provide a certain amount of affection. And they had one cat, and the two wings, the east-west and the east wing and west wing, both wanted the cat to be home-based in their wing. And so it created all this strife, all this fighting between them, and they'd each try to lure the cat and then keep the cat. And Nansen could see this was becoming this huge thing in the monastery where people are obsessing about this cat. So he gathered all the monastics and he brought the cat in, and he had a cleaver from the kitchen. He held up the cat and he said, I want to see if any one of you has one word of Zen. If you have one word of Zen, this cat lives. If you can't come up with a word of Zen, the cat dies. And all the monks were dumbfounded. Nobody could say anything or do anything. And so the story is, the koan is that Nansen cut the cat in two. The modern teachers, myself included, don't actually think that's what happened. We think Joshu or Nansen would have maintained the precepts and would have kept the cat alive. My hunch is he probably gave the cat to a nearby family, but removed it from the temple. That was the killing of it to the monks. And so effectively all the monks there failed this koan. And Joshu was gone for the day and came back, and Nansen told him this story. This happened today. And he said to Joshu, what would you have done? What word of Zen would you have offered? And Joshu picked up his sandals and put them on his head and walked out of the room. And Nansen said, if you had been here, it would have saved the cat. So that's the koan. But to me, what's important about this isn't so much Joshu's actions, but it's really a question, Nansen saying, who loves this cat? And they didn't love the cat enough to surrender the cat, to say, I'd rather see the cat alive in the other wing than to see it die. And so it was still a selfish kind of love on their part. They couldn't love the cat more than they did love the cat as possession. And so for us, this is part of the journey, is really opening to contacting that kind of love that lets us soften and lets us release things that may feel important but aren't actually true. And that becomes part of our focus. I mean, I talk a lot with students about using the lens of truth. What's the truth? We have all these opinions and ideas, but we have to really be clear. And anything that's not the truth, we have to release. And we do a lot of this because of love. Love softens, it tenderizes, it supports. It's just a tremendous, important quality. And for me, that's why I stress the Brahma Viharas and wrote Buddha's Heart. And it's one of my hopes in finishing Zen Dharma transmission is I'll get access to teach in some of the Zen centers. And that's what I want to do. I want to bring the heart practices in. They're not there. I've had a few of the old timers tell me they don't think that that's going to be successful. But I'll try anyway. I think it's worth it. Besides, it'd be nice to see some of the old Zen, the Zen old-timers, working their hearts, and shedding a few tears would be a good thing, in my view. Anyway, so just reflect on that in the inclusion and importance of love today. That this is what you're doing, this is your motivation, this is how this all works, is because of love. All the various kinds of loves. I think it was the Greeks, the philosophers, that had something like 26 definitions of love. They had love of spouse, love of child, love of nature, all these different loves. In English, we don't really do it that way. We have sort of love, the generic